So the situation in Hoosick Falls is by no means unique. The question is how we handle it and how we resolve it and how we move forward.
DOH and DEC, among other state officials, continue to be a presence in Hoosick Falls, and we will continue to be a presence for time to come.
This is not a situation, anything that any of us asked for, but here it is.
You know, I have been an elected individual 35 years in my lifetime, and I don't think that I have ever faced such a difficult time for a community as this one has been.
Welcome to part 2 of the Messages Water special on Hoosick Falls. If you don't remember from a few weeks back in part 1, we talked about this small factory town on the New York-Vermont border that has been dealing with a contaminated water supply since last December. Although that problem far outreaches that short-term calculation, for the sake of our story today we're looking at the reactions of various people within the state since those first media reports were made available last year. You may remember part 1 when we talked to Michael Hickey, who in 2014 did personal tests on the water supply of Hoosick Falls after he noticed alarming cancer rates in the town, and mainly spurred by his own father's death from kidney cancer in 2013. We also spoke with investigative reporter Brendan J. Lyons of the Albany Times-Union, who undoubtedly was the first to break this scandalous story into the mainstream. And lastly, we spoke to Dr. Richard Clapp of Boston University, who helped us better understand the wide-ranging effects of the chemical known as PFOA. If you haven't heard part 1, I advise you to go do so right now for your own sake before you listen on. And you can find that on the Messages YouTube channel, if you simply search on YouTube, The Message WCDB. Those 4 different voices you heard at the top were, in order, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, his Director of State Operations Jim Malatras, Hoosick Falls Supervisor Mark Serdam, and lastly, State Senator Kathleen Marchione. And just a side note, you'll be hearing more of those 4 and others from a March 13th press conference that marked the governor's first visit to Hoosick Falls since the water crisis began. Here are some more of the governor's remarks from that day.
Situations with chemicals in the water, could have been avoided, they weren't, and we're going to see more and more of it. So I don't believe there's any life strategy or government strategy that says make sure you don't have any problems. This situation with chemicals in the water, I would love to say, is unique, and we don't think this is ever going to happen again. We were chatting inside. Unfortunately, I believe we're going to continue to find situations like this all throughout the state, all throughout the country. This is a product of what we did in some case decades ago. We were in the manufacturing economy, we were making things, we were using chemicals that were never used before. We allowed waste disposal in fashions that in retrospect were not prudent, and now in many ways we're paying the price as a society. To me, there were always 2 threshold moments. One, after you install the filtration devices, do the filtration devices work? I'm on site today to get that answer. The second threshold will be, what do you do long term? And is the permanent filtration system the answer? Is an alternative water source the answer? And that's the second question which we've been discussing today, but we don't yet have the answer. The answer for today was the temporary filter is installed. They have done the testing. The water that comes out of the temporary filter, the Calgon filter, is what they call non-detect for PFOA. So that is very, very good. That means the filter works. The filter on the village system works. We've declared this site a state Superfund site. which gives the state additional power to come in and mandate cleanup, do cleanup ourselves, and then hold the company responsible for the cost of the cleanup. We've also installed, for homes that are not on the village system, we have put in basically well-based filtration systems.
The governor, as we heard at the top of this recording, was not the only one in attendance to speak at this March 13th press conference. We also heard from State Senator Kathleen Marchione of New York's 43rd District. Aside from representing Hoosick Falls, the state senator represents Petersburg as well, another town with reports of PFOA in the water supply. And some of her remarks here, especially the one about leaving no stones unturned, kind of ring a little hollow, one could argue. And some have argued that the various state departments, including the Environmental Conservation Department and the Department of Health, haven't been entirely transparent throughout this situation. Just from personal experience in contacting those departments as well as other municipalities, brushing someone off or under the rug isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. Anyway, take a listen to State Senator Kathleen Marchione.
People are concerned about themselves, their health, their children, their property values. There's just a gamut of things that are so very important to life, to every single one of us. There hasn't been a stone left unturned. And as stones are coming up and they're being unturned, they're being addressed.
It's clear that the situation in Hoosick Falls and the surrounding area has been in dire straits for months now. Just talking about the issue and trying to come up with solutions has struck the nerves of many residents in the region who are worried about a multitude of problems they could face, including but not limited to losing jobs at the McCaffrey factory plant that has been at the center of this water contamination, as well as falling real estate value. Here's Hoosick Falls Town Supervisor Mark Serdam at the March 13th press conference.
I am hearing from the state that they do want to work with us. They are trying to do everything that they can, within the limitations that we have. None of us have ever dealt with a situation like this. But we're a great community. We are very fortunate and very blessed to be a safe community. We have a small 9-hole golf course right in the center of our village. We have a community pool, ice skating rink. We have tennis courts, basketball courts, ball fields. Kids can still ride their bikes in the village and feel safe. So this is a safe community. It's a great community. We're not closing up shop and going anywhere. This problem will be fixed. And the town of Hoosick, I would welcome anybody to come here. This is a great community, so thank you.
Here, here. Here, board.
That's a tough act to follow. Wow.
The man speaking at the end of that was the town's mayor, David Borge, who has taken a shellacking in the media, and some argue he should, and some argue he shouldn't based on a ton of circumstances, with the foremost that he shouldn't be criticized based on the fact that he did bring this to the state level, though again, some argue that was a little late. And he's cautiously optimistic at this March 13th press conference, handing around congratulations and thanks to those from the state and local level surrounding the podium.
I firmly believe that we are at the top of the mountain and we can see over the top.
I contacted the mayor late last month by email, looking to eventually ask him a couple of questions for the purpose of this show, but he declined an audio interview, writing that the best way for him to answer questions is via email. One of his answers reiterates what he said on the March 13th stage, though brings it a little farther, and I quote, "As part of the village's efforts to develop a comprehensive strategy for dealing with the PFOA issue, we have assembled a team of experts, legal, engineering, and communications to assist us." And the mayor closed by writing that New York State is investigating information it has received about potential disposal sites that may be contributing to the situation. It will likely be several years before those state investigations are completed and the sources of PFOA are thoroughly remediated. One of the most fascinating parts of this press conference came only at the tail end of it all, when the governor opened the floor for questions. Probably not surprising that part of the video on the governor's YouTube channel was not included. Instead, I found a cell phone recording done by Matthew Hamilton of the Albany Times-Union. Some of the exchanges are amusing and some are downright baffling, so take a listen.
Governor Cuomo, can you tell us, it's very unlike you to stay away from a situation like this for so long. Just yesterday you were out there in the Hudson River hours after this barge collapse, something you're known for doing, rushing to the scene, hooking up cars yourself on the highway during snowstorms, but we're at more than 100 days since this really started to be known. Why have you stayed away for so long personally?
Yeah, well, what you're leaving out is the facts of the circumstance, right? We're dealing with issues all across the state. You go personally where you need it personally to do something. In a snowstorm, that's a different situation. When you have a tugboat accident yesterday where you're still not sure where the bodies are and if people are alive or dead, and you have state police divers that are going to put their lives in jeopardy to dive to try to save someone's life, that is a different situation. On this situation, I was involved as soon as I heard about it. We had meetings, discussions. It's about the installation of filtration equipment. I saw the filter today. It's an attractive filter. It's a big filter. It looks good in gray. I don't know if they come in other colors. I don't know if they have a designer model. But my seeing the filter and touching the filter was not all that relevant, I think. But it was a nice filter. The threshold question was from day one. Okay, we've identified that this chemical needs to be filtered. Can you filter the chemical? Yes or no? How do we do it? Who bears the cost? That was always the question. And that was not an on-the-ground question. That was an engineering question, a science question, an operational question, a financial question, and that's how we dealt with it. But it is a nice looking filter.
Did you stay away at all because of the criticism? The health department has been extensively criticized here. You guys talk about the preparation, but that's not the general public sense.
Every system, first of all, every situation that deals with an emergency, there's always criticism, always criticism. Some snarky reporter always finds something to criticize. I think it's in the job description.
Well, looking for the truth, yes.
Yeah, or just looking to criticize, right, depending on your point of view. So if you were going to stay away from a situation because you were going to be criticized, you would be under your bed as an elected official across the board, all right? So no. Second, I think the state has performed admirably here, as you've heard from everyone. Now, you can have your own opinion, but then say, that's my opinion, right? Local officials say the state did very well, but my personal opinion is they didn't. And then your expertise will be your credential.
But Governor, I think the reason why there's a lot of criticism is because we've asked questions like, for example, when did the state find out PFOA existed here? And we never got a straight answer. So I'm going to ask you again, when did the state find out that PFOA existed?
We can get you the dates. When the state, there was local testing done, the county was notified, the state was notified from the county that PFOA was detected. This next question becomes, and what does that mean, PFOA was detected? What do you do? What's the right level? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? And that's where the state, frankly, steps out and the federal government steps in. We recently did a letter to the EPA, 3 governors. The state is not going to set a level for PFOA. It is not our place. We don't have the capacity. We're going to look to the federal government to say to us, this is the level of PFOA for short-term exposure, long-term exposure. Once they set that level, then it's our responsibility, state, county, local, to make sure we are doing what we need to do to hit that level.
But other states haven't waited for that. I mean, New Jersey is 20 parts per trillion. We know that 40 parts per trillion. Vermont is 20 parts per trillion. I mean, they haven't waited for the EPA to come down.
That's right. Well, we were following the EPA guideline, which was 400 parts per trillion for short-term exposure. There was no EPA guidance for long-term exposure, which then became the question, as I understand it. There was only a short-term exposure number. The early tests that came back, there were 2 water sources that were above the 400. They were taken offline. The question became, what was the right level for long-term exposure? The state has not set that number. We don't anticipate setting that number. We're looking to the EPA, which frankly has more capacity than we do, to set that number. And the reason 3 governors did a letter is our position is we should all have the same level. It makes no sense for Vermont to have one level and New York to have one level and another state to have one level. If it's unsafe, it's unsafe. If it's unsafe in New York, it theoretically is unsafe in Vermont, right? If you can't drink that level in New York, you shouldn't be drinking that level in Vermont. So we think the EPA should set a number, and whatever that number is, we'll follow. But we need the number.
This concludes our part 2 of the water crisis happening in the Hoosick Falls region. There's still so many grounds left to cover, or as Kathleen Marchione would put it, no stones left unturned. But we at The Message thought it prudent that the governmental agencies working against this water crisis be given a voice. And though it was almost impossible to get them to personally talk to me on the record, this March 13th press conference, which is available in full on YouTube, served as a platform for nearly all of the sound you heard today. So a special thanks there. Also a big thank you to Matthew Hamilton and the recording he took of those snarky reporters, as the governor would put it, doing their jobs. As always, our executive music producer is Marsh Sound, and you can find more of his sounds at marshsound.bandcamp.com. We'll be back with more coverage of this crisis at some point in the future, but in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the show.
Tell us why do we have a soul? religious systems supply a small amount of hope. They tell us, or they imply, that we have a soul. But where is this soul?